Fallout New Vegas has 8 companions to choose from across the base game, plus a few temporary ones across the DLCs. Each has their own backstory that we can uncover as we travel with them, as well as a unique quest to earn their loyalty and help make them more powerful. In this video, we're going to be exploring the pros, cons, and storylines of each of them, what kinds of character builds each complements, whilst also ranking them in the order of what I believe to be worst to best, taking into account both their use on the battlefield as well as just how interesting and fun they are to have around. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Down at the very bottom here is our Old World Blues companion dog named Roxie, created in the X8 facility by slicing together a dog and a robot after finding the holotape to do so on a table just outside the test center. Now, whilst Roxie would rank higher here if she could accompany us across the entire Big Empty, her first problem is that she will not leave the X8 facility. She can help us through everything in there, the score run tests and what have you, but even with those, there's a bit of an issue. See, if Roxie's health reaches 0, unlike all the other companions, she will just immediately die. She can be brought back as many times as we want by returning to the splicing machine, but that's not exactly convenient when we're in the middle of the institutional test. More so, you just want to ensure some version of her is alive come the end of the DLC, as she will then, in an end credit slide, finally venture into the Mojave where she'll meet Rex. The two are obviously perfectly matched and will somehow even breed a litter of cyberpups. In fact, even if Rex is dead, Roxie will still drag his body back to the Big Empty, revive him, and have cyberpups all the same. Cute. But overall, as a companion, Roxie is fairly limited and useless. Overall, in fact, all the DLC companions suffer a few issues, namely the fact that we can only recruit and travel with them within their specific DLC. This also mostly applies to Dead Money and Honest Hearts, with Honest Hearts coming out second to last here. The 3 followers we can get in this DLC are Follows Chalk from the Dead Horses tribe, Waking Cloud from the Sorrows, and finally Joshua Graham, the Burned Man, who apparently survived being tossed into the Grand Canyon by Kaisar. Each of the 3 only follow us very temporarily even within the Honest Hearts storyline itself, with Follows Chalk accompanying us on the initial quests, usefully providing lore insights on the local region along with the well-stacked Cairns perk, revealing nearby map markers when summiting places like ranger stations and boosting our perception by 3 for 3 minutes. Useful, for sure, and always nice to have someone to get attacked on our behalf in the company. Just again, only around for a very limited time, though we will later get to help him decide whether he stays with the Dead Horses tribe or indulges his wanderlust and goes off to explore the worlds. The point that we then lose Follows Chalk is the same moment that we instead gain Waking Cloud of the Sorrows tribe. She instead gives us the more stealth-oriented perk called Quiet as Waters, lowering the perception of the Whitelegs tribe and making it easier to sneak by them. She instead can provide some additional lore insights into the Sorrows tribe and generally supports us in combat through the second half of Honest Hearts. But again, our time with her runs a very limited span, with the main decision we get to make regarding her future relating to whether or not we're honest with her about the fate of her husband, who's recently sadly died. A fact originally deliberately kept from Waking Cloud so as not to distract her from her important role as a stronger tribe member and its midwife. Though there's also seemingly no issue with her following us into all manner of dangerous situations across Zion, so I think it's gonna be best for everyone, though tragic that she learns the truth. This brings us to Joshua Graham, the most temporary, yet also most interesting of the 3, what with being one of the founding members of Kaisar's Legion, a faction I explore in a lot more detail in my recent Fallout New Vegas endings ranked worst to best video. By the time we get him as a follower though, we're locked into the final main quest of the DLC and don't even have basic options like trading equipment or having him wait. We do, however, get temporary access to his Way of the Canaanite perk, making any 45 caliber auto pistols have less spread and be twice as likely to score crit hits. Though this is of course pretty situational depending on what build you're using. I personally plasma rifled most of this DLC, but hey, it's something and better than nothing for the short time Joshua is our follower. Maybe if these 3 could come back with us to the Mojave, they'd rank different, but as is, it's only fair to place them down here. Suffering a similar problem, but overall being much more of a focal point for the DLC itself, the Dead Money companions rank quite a bit higher, but still all the way down here for reasons we'll get to. In fact, it's a real shame that these guys can't come back with us to the Wasteland, as they are some of the most uniquely written and interesting followers we can have for the more brief time we get to know them. First of all, Dog and God are two sides of a Nightkin with, I guess, dissociative identity disorder. Dog being the more subservient, animalistic sounding persona, conditioned by the Master and subsequently drawn to the authority of Father Elijah. Then God being the internal voice of reason, attempting to break free from the Master's subservient conditioning and stop bringing people to the Sierra Madre for Father Elijah. The two personalities can easily be switched with the use of two holotapes, one playing the voice of Father Elijah to let Dog out of his cage, and the other the voice of God to send him back in. God is less proficient in combat, though honestly he's still pretty awesome, and grants us the In My Footsteps perk, boosting our stealth and helping us to avoid setting off traps. Dog, on the other hand, can help in finishing off ghost people, where usually we'll need to deliver one final blow to destroy them forever and stop them getting up. He can instead consume them to sate his hunger. Both very useful around the Sierra Madre, with which persona we choose to travel with being more dependent on narrative than anything else. Again, Dog and God's story is far more interesting than either's utility as a companion, with ending options to either kill this Nightkin entirely, let Dog seize full and permanent control, in which case he'll wander the wasteland for years, eating entire settlement populations, let God take over, suppressing the beast but living a peaceful life, or manage to merge the two together, all but erasing their memories up to this point, but finally granting peace to both in equal measure. He's possibly the most intriguing character out of these three, but it's actually a really tough one. They're all very strongly written. Second then, we have Dean Domino, a pre-war singer turned ghoul and largely responsible for the Sierra Madre being what it is. He's also one of the most ridiculously petty people ever, and cannot abide the idea of anyone being better than him. If we ever accidentally talk down to Dean, or question his wisdom, it's then very unlikely that he'll even be able to survive this DLC. Again, he's only available as a companion for a couple of quests, during which he'll grant the Unclean Living perk, providing a small delay and overall reduced damage when walking through the clouds. And in the 200 years since the world has ended, rather than go off and find something better to do with his life, Dean remained obsessed with getting inside the Sierra Madre's vaults. He hated the former owner, Frederick Sinclair, purely because his ambitions and ability to achieve them then damaged Dean's own ego.
He thought he was better than me. Don't believe me? Look around. This big casino, this big colossal monument. Think it was for some woman? No. All ego, all self-righteous and lights, fit him perfect. Had to take him down a few pegs, bring him down to my level.
I mean, cool, but so what? Sinclair is dead. You are not. Go live what can now be a very long life for you. Don't get me wrong, as dislikable as I find Dean, he is another brilliantly written companion, and that same fact rings true for the third. Christine Royce is a former Brotherhood scribe and also former partner to Veronica, but after Father Elijah lost Helios 1 and was cast from the Brotherhood, he separated Veronica and Christine in the hopes that Veronica would follow him to the Sierra Madre. Resultantly, Christine pursued him for revenge. First to Big Mountain, where she was experimented on and given all of her facial scarring before Ulysses rescued her, and she then continued on to the Sierra Madre. There she was captured by Dog, much like us, but in her, Dean Domino also saw an opportunity. Needing the voice of Sinclair's former lover, Vera Keyes, to access the Sierra Madre's vault, he threw Christine into a faulty auto-dock and programmed it to reconstruct Christine's voice box to match Vera's. For weeks, Christine was trapped as her larynx was repeatedly cut open, much of the time without even the pain-killing anesthetic of Stimpaks. When we finally rescue her, she's both traumatized and mute. Again, this is a very cool concept for a companion, communicating entirely through expressions, with us often having to guess what exactly she's trying to say. And the fact that despite this, she still feels like a strongly written and compelling character that we care about is a testament to Dead Money's writing, with also arguably the most useful useful companion perk of increasing our bomb collar timer from 10 seconds to 20. I mean, some of those radios are a frantic panic to find as is, and unlike Dean, Christine is actually pretty easy to keep alive in Dead Money, provided we're just nice to her, not manipulating her into doing anything like everyone else has previously. After getting inside the Sierra Madre, Christine will finally get a voice, Vera's voice, finding a working autodoc to fix her, and turning out to be voiced by Laura Bailey, aka Piper and Serana, two of the most memorable characters from two very similar games, a trend that certainly carries over with Christine. Difference being that when she was our companion, she had no voice at all. All round, three of the most compelling Fallout characters ever that also happen to briefly occupy roles as companions. The only reason they rank down here is because there's no fair way to place them any higher when we can't utilize them for the majority of the game. I mean, writing-wise, you could place them at the very top of the list, but as reliable most of the game companions, they can't really be compared against the same criteria as the main 8. It's a real shame they can't accompany us back to the Mojave, but then maybe it's for the best that their stories remain concentrated like this. Before we get on to discussing the main companions, let me just say this list is going to have to be a bit unavoidably subjective. Different builds do of course lend themselves to the different abilities of various companions, and each person's individual preference of a companion's personality is going to be an important factor. That said, down at the bottom for me is everyone's favourite Nightkin grandmother, Lily Bowen. A resident of Jacobstown when we first meet her, Lily was actually born in Vault 17, living a peaceful life for 75 years, growing into an elderly grandmother, when one day the master super mutants raided her vault. Lily was subjected to the forced evolutionary virus, prolonging her life indefinitely, but also turning her into a Nightkin. After that, she became a spy and occasionally an assassin for the Master. Then, once the events of Fallout 1 had concluded and the cathedral had been destroyed, Lily tried to return to her old vault, but instead wound up at the haven for mutants that is Jacobstown, where she's remained ever since, shepherding Bighorners. This is where we and a group of Night Stalkers come in. After continued assaults on Lily's Bighorners, she'll agree to come with us to help deal with the Night Stalkers behind it. Being a Nightkin, Lily suffers a few limitations and also just has a few tendencies that can be annoying. For one, Lily's available weapons that she can use are limited. Anything small like knives, pistols are not available for Lily. That also means she can't use any standard holdout weapons in casinos save for grenades. A shame, because otherwise, despite being the biggest companion, Lily is ironically largely stealth focused. Her perk, Stealth Girl, actually doubles the durability of our own stealth boys and gives us a 10% bonus damage to crits that we score while sneaking. As for Lily herself, just like all the Nightkin, she spends half her time in stealth boy mode, though this can also sometimes get annoying when we're trying to look for her. It also makes it a lot easier to accidentally leave her behind somewhere and need to retrace our steps to find her again. Also, as a Nightkin, Lily comes with the standard dose of schizophrenic insanity. Whilst you might first assume that the Leo she's always talking to is some mental manifestation of a grandson, that isn't actually the case. Lily's grandkids were called Jimmy and Becky. Leo is Lily's more violent alter ego. Similar in a way to God and Dog, Leo manifests in the back of Lily's mind like a devil on her shoulder, inciting her to do terrible things. Lily herself, underneath the whole Nightkin getup, is still at her core a doting grandmother, one who extends that same love and care towards us when becoming a member of our party, often charging into the fray quicker than we could if I didn't have a sprint mod installed, willing to take the brunt of the damage. The problem with this level of bravery though is that when Lily falls to a quarter health, Leo gets a chance to take over, sending Lily into a psychotic break of sheer ferocity where she won't for a time take any commands from us. Fortunately, we can fix that, but at a cost. First though, we need to witness Lily suffer a psychotic break in combat. We also need to ask about Leo and about the medicine she's taking, and once all three of these conditions are met, an event will trigger where we can slightly alter Lily forever.
Oh my goodness, look at these little angels. Becky, that dress looks so lovely.
We're hunting
Me, oh my word, how you've grown.
I'm 4 whole feet, Grandma. Do you bring us presents, Grandma?
Well now, I don't know. Have you been good to your mommy and daddy?
Yes.
Well then, let Grandma see what you've got.
By the way, if you're wondering why I have all of the companions following me, it's a mod called JIP Companions Command and Control, and it allowed me to complete some companion quests quicker and test things more efficiently for the purposes of this video. Anyway, we can now ask Lily what she was listening to, and she'll confess that she's only been taking half doses of her antipsychotic medicine, as it's also been suppressing her more distant memories, i.e. those of her grandkids. So now we have three choices. Force Lily to take her medicine properly, removing her psychotic breaks, but also making her probably sad and less effective in combat, translated in a drop of her melee weapon skill. Or we can keep things as they are, with the breaks continuing, but now being something we can snap her out of by entering sneak mode. Finally, there's the chaotic option. Convince Lily to throw out her meds entirely, raising the threshold for a psychotic break to just half HP, but now boosting Lily's melee skill to 100, basically letting you tip the scales on whether Lily should be more of a berserker or a stealthy ally. Compared to some of the other companions, Lily is also more generally tolerable of our actions, especially in Legion playthroughs, so she may also be more preferable to use sometimes on account of there just being less companions to choose from. Overall, Lily is a kind-hearted, if eccentric companion with a perfectly fleshed out backstory, though perhaps one a little less compelling, at least to me, than some of the others. That, and her Nightkin limitations, are enough to place her then at the bottom of the main list. Not bad by any means, just an interesting mix of juxtaposing qualities that don't really lean into any one particular build. Arguably the companion with the biggest attitude, Rose of Sharon Cassidy is everyone's favourite former caravan owner and functional alcoholic. Born the daughter of John Cassidy from Fallout 2, who eventually settled down with a tribal woman, but who left again when Cass was still only young. Eventually, Cass would grow up to become a peddler of goods, establishing the company Cassidy Caravans. Starting by transporting whiskey, she was eventually forced to switch over to water after her strong alcoholism was leading her to consume her entire stock across long journeys. Despite this frequent inebriation on its owner's part though, Cassidy Caravan's success continued to grow, and Cass would go on to hire multiple employees to peddle goods around the Mojave. But this then becoming NCR territory, where monopolies have a tendency to thrive, Cassidy Caravans was hit with multiple violent attacks. An elaborate ruse by both the rival Crimson Caravans and the Van Graff arms-dealing family to drive Cass's business into the ground before absorbing it. That is probably where we come in. After being grounded from travelling at Mojave Outpost by the NCR due to unsafe conditions for caravans, we head over there to find Cass and deliver an offer from Alice McClafferty, finally convincing Cass to sell the one thing she has left, her family's name, to the very company that conspired to destroy her in the first place. Out of all the companions in the game, Cass is one of the more difficult to recruit. We'll need to convince her to leave it all behind, requiring either a 50 speech skill or 75 barter, though they are both skills always worth leveling early in my opinion, unless you're trying to get those low charisma, low intelligence dialogues. But the fact is that Cass likely won't be recruitable immediately, making her most likely a mid-game companion. This first meeting shows pretty strongly the strength of Cass's character. Sat here in a bar with nothing left but her pride, she is pretty unwilling to throw that away too. Unwilling to sell a company name even though it's worth nothing now on account of the fact that it's her family name, kept now out of nothing but personal pride. But successfully getting her to sell will leave her with no direct path, so we can ask her to come with us. Traveling with Cass will unlock the Whiskey Rose perk, which quite simply removes any negative effects caused by alcohol. Consuming tons of it will still get us addicted, it's just that that'll no longer have any negative consequences so long as Cass is with us. But for this perk to really be effective, we'll need to be picking up a lot of alcohol on our travels and regularly consuming it. Now, the main benefits to drinking most of the alcohols in the game are a buff to strength and charisma, varying between 1 and 3 depending on our survival skill. It also lowers our intelligence, but not if we have Cass. Now, charisma is easily the most useless special skill in New Vegas. There's a few speech options in the game that require it, but 99% of the time will be just fine speccing into speech and barter. Strength, on the other hand, is very useful when using melee or heavy weapons, or when just wanting to take a quick trip home when over encumbered. So really, that's the main use of alcohol. Though drinking whiskey regularly in combat does does also boost our damage threshold and works basically like additional armor. So Cass's perk is useful, but requires more active management than many of the others. Once Cass is our companion, and free once again to wander the Mojave, then she'll request that we head over to her caravan wreckages to pay our respects. But when reaching the first one, it's clear that it wasn't burned down by raiders. It was vaporized by energy weapons. Checking out the rest will confirm Cass's suspicions. Her caravans were destroyed by the Crimson Caravan and Von Graf's, and now she'll want revenge.
I'm gonna get some extra ammo, a few bottles of whiskey, and then show them how Cassidy's settle accounts.
Straight up doing it this way, going into both places and, well, starting blasting, will for one be very difficult. The Von Grafs especially are sitting on one of the largest stockpiles of plasma weapons in the entire game. But if we are somehow successful in this endeavor, Cass will permanently become more powerful with guns, dealing 15% extra gun damage with the Hand of Vengeance perk. The alternative option, however, involves placing our faith in the NCR. You know, that slow-moving, overstretched, hugely bureaucratic organization that'll need to process probably a novel of paperwork just to open up an investigation into both organizations. Still, we can indeed do the legwork and secure evidence that incriminates both parties, dealing with the situation much more peacefully but also much more slowly. The years of paperwork this will involve will mean no immediate effect in this case, but Cass is still content, knowing the same legal framework that will take far more time to work will also make sure to stifle the two groups in a far more long-term way, calming her down and providing the Calm Heart perk, permanently boosting Cass's hit points by 60. Now, stats-wise, she's one of the more run-of-the-mill companions, being generally useful in combat whilst not having us need to lean into anything, save perhaps for alcoholism. And since we don't need Cass to gain alcohol's positive effects, and the negative ones aren't really that bad, taking Cass over one of the others could mean missing out on something a bit more useful. Then again, if you're purely in it for personality, Cass does have the most dialogue of any companion in the game, most of it relating to just wanting a drink, but she also does make some hilariously inaccurate observations of the wasteland, like thinking Camp Golf is named after an NCR president, not because it was, you know, a golf course. Yeah, for someone who's been around a lot, you wouldn't necessarily think it of her. Having a dog is one of the absolute staples to any Fallout game, and whilst this role usually falls to a canine friend named Dogmeat, New Vegas instead gives us the more unique, cybernetic police dog from before the war named Rex, Latin for king, owing to the fact that when we first meet him, he's owned by the king in Freeside, brought there by a salvager not in the best condition, but fixed up by the followers of the apocalypse after 200 years of wandering. He was also, prior to this, unfortunate enough to fall into the ranks of the Legion, but managed to get out one way or another during their sacking of Denver, likely where he sustained the wounds he had when brought before the king. Now this is where we come in. Though his cybernetic enhancements have made Rex live well beyond any other dog, he's literally about 1400 years old in dog years, Rex's brain is finally starting to show signs of neural degeneration. The only person capable of providing the necessary brain surgery is Dr. Henry right over in Jacobstown, and thus Rex first becomes our companion so we can take him there. Being a dog, Rex also occupies a separate companion slot to any of our human followers, something shared only with Eddie. And whilst I would feel bad placing a dog below a robot, Eddie does have a few unfair advantages, which we'll get to later. As for Rex though, he does tick most of the good boxes for any companion. An interesting, if short quest, adorable personality, quirks despite never uttering a word, and above all, a loyal and physically powerful companion. Rex can of course use any conventional weapons, but in a way that often proves useful. When charging ahead of us into the fray, enemies instead flock to him, leaving us free to open fire from a distance and providing a great edge, especially given he could be paired with one of the 6 other humanoid companions. The Search and Mark perk that Rex gives us can also be passively useful for exploration, highlighting any containers in green that contain food, chems, guns, and ammunition when we zoom in or aim down the sights. A very useful time saver in the vanilla game, though I would also just recommend, if you're on PC, the loot menu mods, for more convenient Fallout 4-esque looting in general. When handing him over to us, the king explains that Rex doesn't like two things: rats and hats. And indeed, Dogmeat will violently savage any rats or mole rats he sees in-game, save thankfully for Snuffles. And he'll bark at anybody he sees wearing a hat. Though honestly, I think this aspect just gives Rex some character. Heading over to Jacobstown though to fix Rex's brain, Dr. Henry will immediately tell us there's no fixing about it.
It's neural degradation. Biomed gel can only preserve a living brain for so long, so you'll need to find a replacement.
Yep, in order to save Rex, and he will die in the endgame slides if we don't do this, we have to find him a new brain. An act that surely would invoke the whole Ship of Theseus hypothesis. Now, much of Rex's body has already been replaced, though granted not all, but the brain is kind of the bit where the consciousness of the being is. Though, in this case, Rex somehow maintains his old memories, whilst also taking on those of the new brain, of which there are 3 potential candidates, each providing a different companion perk. We can buy Old Lady Gibson's oldest dog, Ray, getting the Faithful Protector perk, strengthening the damage of Rex's bites, defeat a fiend dog named Violetta, granting Rex 50% additional movement speed with Unshakable Tracker, or defeat a Legion dog named Looper to raise Rex's damage threshold by 10. Now, none of these cause a huge change to Rex's visible personality for the rest of the game, but they do affect how his future is talked about in the ending slides, with seemingly the most peaceful being to obtain Old Lady Gibson's dog brain, whilst Violetta's will make Rex more vicious, and Looper's will give him even more memories of the Legion. Overall, you really can't go wrong with a dog companion in any Fallout. Rex will never judge any of our actions like humans can, he'll just loyally follow along. Thankfully, after getting his new brain as well, the king will let us hold on to him, and judging by the later events of the Fallout TV show, that was probably for the best. Easily the most academically intelligent of the companions next, Arcade Gannon can be found at the camp of the Followers of the Apocalypse over in Freeside, and will agree to join us based on a few conditions, either requiring 75 speech, the confirmed bachelor perk, or a liked reputation with the Followers and no positive reputation with the Legion. In fact, Gannon has the second most strongly negative view on Caesar's Legion after Craig Boone, so it won't be all-out war the moment we see Legion troops with him, but visiting the Legion camp, for instance, will lead to some questioning. For that reason, it's best to try and recruit Arcade earlier on if possible, raising our Followers of the Apocalypse reputation by bringing them medical supplies. Once recruited, Gannon will provide the better healing perk, making our heals 20% more effective. It's nice to have, sure, heals certainly go a little further this way, but depending on how often you need healing and how thoroughly you loot places, you may find you have healing items in relative abundance anyway. In terms of weapons, Arcade is best with energy guns as well as melee, making him again another decent all-rounder with a more science-based edge and additional medical expertise. Why exactly is this guy so smart? Well, out of all companions in the game, Arcade Gannon starts out the most mysterious. Significantly less forthcoming about his past than most of the rest, it'll take a number of specific encounters, in which he says a little too much, before Arcade finally comes clean. We'll also need to progress the main quest a fair ways until we've effectively committed to either the NCR, House, or Yes Man. I've done a whole nother video breaking down the pros and cons of each game ending, by the way. Finally though, after progressing both the main story and our relationship with Arcade enough, he'll finally explain outright his origins.
My late father was an officer in a group called the Enclave, a remnant of America's pre-war government.
Yep, Arcade is a child of the Enclave. He's also the companion most in favor of a fully independent Vegas though, ironically, not wanting the NCR nor Mr. House to hold it ideally, but seeing both as far more preferable to the Legion. This, of course, begins the quest, named after a song that everyone sings at New Year's, and under Arcade's guidance, we can go and track down the surviving elderly former members of Arcade's Enclave Remnants group, who can be seriously powerful allies in the final battle. With the exception of Eddie's expanded role in Lonesome Road, this is by far the biggest and most important companion quest in the entire game. Literally, the only big tie-in to the Enclave, in fact, in the whole of New Vegas. And so, tracking down the 5 remnant members of the Enclave to unlock a password to their bunker, each will trigger extra dialogue from Arcade, expanding on his past and his former relationships to the 5. From Daisy Whitman being like a mother to him, to Judah Krieger helping to hold the entire group together. All brief, but nonetheless less interesting characters, and allies who can accompany us all the way to the final boss fight during the second battle of Hoover Dam. But interesting as Arcade's quest is though, finishing it does end his time with us as a companion, potentially getting us instead his Gannon family Tesla armor, boosting energy weapon effectiveness and rad resistance, and being all round one of the most powerful armor sets in the game. If not for this item, I would simply recommend delaying for Auld Lang Syne into the very late game, but then if wanting to use the armor for longer, it is worth completing earlier. Whilst Gannon isn't the only companion we need to lose to complete a specific quest, he is the only one lost by directly completing the quest that relates to him specifically. When we finally learn fully just who he is, he leaves the party, creating the odd dynamic of not wanting to aid Arcade like we do the other companions. Everyone else simply becomes a more powerful ally once we complete their unique quest, but Arcade gets no such treatment. The more we learn about him, the closer we get to losing him. Alternatively, if progressing things further with the Legion, we do get the other option to sell Arcade as a slave doctor to treat Caesar's condition permanently. Literally the most hellish life Arcade could possibly imagine, though he does become an entertaining academic sparring partner of sorts for Caesar. Overall, Arcade has one of the most interesting stories of all the companions, and the Caesar option makes for an excellent evil character choice. He would rank higher, probably, if not for the dilemma of having to actively avoid completing his main quest in order to actually keep him as a companion. On our first trip to the New Vegas Strip, we'll very likely pass through Trading Post 188, where we'll meet an unassuming cloaked woman named Veronica, who claims to live in a hole in the ground but is venturing out to gather supplies for her family. It's not a lie, but she is deliberately omitting some glaring details, before then asking us our opinion of the Brotherhood of Steel. Now, it is extremely easy to straight up lose Veronica as a companion here if we speak about the Brotherhood negatively, but provided we're just neutral or even positive, Veronica is one of the easiest and earliest companions to acquire. This is especially useful when we consider Veronica's basic perk. Scribe Assistance provides a dialogue option for Veronica to craft things whilst on the go, effectively making her into a portable workbench. Especially useful if using energy weapons, since we can then recycle and recharge ammunition generally whenever needed. Similar to Gannon, Veronica is proficient in the use of energy weapons, but also unarmed melee, making her a useful bullet sponge if we're running more of a glass cannon build. Being a member of the Brotherhood, she also provides the quickest way to get inside the Hidden Valley bunker later on, as she can simply ask the members inside to open the door. Progressing her companion quest, I Could Make You Care, which ties directly into the shorter Brotherhood questline, attempting to convince the faction to emerge from underground by acquiring and showing them a piece of advanced technology being used out in the wasteland. But after acquiring one of these, the Brotherhood still refuses to listen to her, leaving Veronica the options of persisting with trying to make her close-minded family see reason, or to simply give up and leave. Staying will garner the Bonds of Steel perk, strengthening Veronica's loyalty to her family and granting her an additional 4 damage threshold, whereas leaving will involve taking Veronica to join the Followers of the Apocalypse, the only group in the wasteland actively attempting to help people purely because it is a good and decent thing to do. However, in pursuing this option, we will inadvertently get an entire outpost of followers killed. Several Brotherhood paladins will follow us here, slaughtering everyone on the risk that they would learn forbidden Brotherhood knowledge. It is a good opportunity to pick up a few suits of power armor though, and naturally this whole scenario will only reinforce the wisdom of Veronica's decision, and she will instead gain the Causeless Rebel perk, boosting her unarmed and melee attack rates by 30%. Really, the best thing to do with Veronica is outfit her in power armor with a power fist and just let her charge into fights. Despite being just human, she makes for a very decent tank, on par with, if not better, than Lily. But unlike some of the other companions, Veronica's bonuses don't stop there. Sad as her main storyline may be, there is one thing we can do to cheer Veronica up. It's long been a dream of hers to wear a beautiful dress like those seen in the pre-war days, and by placing one in her inventory, we can finally make that dream come true. This can either be formal wear or white glove society attire.
For me? Do you mean it? No, it's too much. Well, okay, but it's too much. Oh, it's perfect. Thank you. I wish I had something to give you. Wait. What about punching? That's the gift that keeps on giving. I could work on your punching with you, if you like. show you how to counter like a scribe.
To be fair, name a pairing that makes more sense than a pretty dress for lessons in punching. The scribe counter technique basically allows us to perform an unarmed counterattack, punching an enemy directly after blocking them. The sort of things that most games nowadays just include in a standard move repertoire, but to be fair, getting it this way isn't too much of a challenge. Now, as mentioned earlier, Veronica was also in a relationship with Christine. In fact, I think it's a crime that after Dead Money, we don't have the option to tell Veronica that we met and likely saved her former lover, much less reunite the two. We can, however, deliver her a final message from Father Elijah, which can be found in the Brotherhood bunker that we enter and leave Dead Money through. Weird that we can't talk about the woman she loved, but can talk about the guy that split them apart to begin with. Giving Veronica Elijah's last message, though, will grant Veronica yet another perk called Elijah's Last Words, boosting Veronica's melee attack speed by 50% and granting each attack a 25% chance to inflict a knockdown. Again, useful if utilizing Veronica as a melee tank, but do think carefully before doing this about whether Veronica will be a regular companion. If we instead choose to keep and read Elijah's holotape for ourselves, then we will get the Elijah's Ramblings perk, boosting our melee crit hit damage permanently by 50%. Potentially more useful if we're running a melee build ourselves, though Veronica performing frequent knockdowns is arguably more of an edge if sticking with her. Ultimately, Veronica's tale provides a somewhat morbid look at the issues surrounding this Brotherhood of Steel chapter especially, though she as a companion is probably a little less interesting than someone like Gannon, but thanks to her additional perks and general tankiness, she can make for one hell of a powerhouse to accompany us across the wasteland. If we're talking sad stories though, then it doesn't get much sadder than the life of Craig Boone. Like Cass, Boone was born a citizen of the NCR, growing up into one of its soldiers. But after being one of those on the offending end of the Bitter Springs Massacre, where hundreds of Great Khan elderly, women and children were gunned down in cold blood, the whole situation left Boone with an understandably bitter taste in his mouth. No pun intended. After that, whilst on leave at the New Vegas Strip, Boone met the woman who would go on to become the love of his life. And the two settled down in the small dinosaur-themed town of Novak. But Carla, unimpressed with her new, quieter life away from the Strip, made it clear to everyone that she didn't think much of Novak or its people. This particularly drew the frustration of Jeannie Mae Crawford, proprietor of the Novak Motel, who, in a plot straight out of Hot Fuzz, saw fit to remove this woman who was shining a bad light on her town by selling Carla into Legion slavery, netting a tidy sum herself in the process. What's even worse is that Carla was pregnant with her and Boone's child, whom Jeannie was also set to profit from years from now with a bonus payment once the child was fully grown. She is, quite undoubtedly, one of the most despicable people in the wastes. Boone, of course, skilled ex-soldier that he was, set off in search for his wife and unborn child, eventually finding her at a slave auction surrounded by legionaries. Knowing their numbers were too great for any chance at a rescue of his wife, Boone did the one thing he could to save her from a life of hell. With one shot from his sniper rifle, he tragically ended both her and their kid's life. And with no knowledge at this point of who in Novak sold her out, the entirety of Boone's rage could only be directed at the Legion and their abhorrent methods. Now, that's where we come in. Arriving in Novak, we can meet Boone during his night shift as a guard atop the dinosaur, and being an outsider, he rather recklessly will trust us with attempting to identify whoever sold out his wife, leading them to the base of the dinosaur, where he can carry out swift, merciless revenge. Now, we can have some sadistic fun with this, given Boone will shoot literally anyone we put there, but if you want to explore more of the potentially evil sides to this quest, check out my video Top 10 Worst Decisions in Fallout New Vegas. To get him as a companion though, we simply have to convince Boone that the person we chose was the right one, whether by actually doing the work or just having high speech. As a companion, Boone will give us the Spotter perk, a very useful little bonus for anybody using guns, which highlights enemies in red when aiming. What's more, Boone himself makes for the best stealth sniper companion, with specialisms in both guns and sneak, as well as a very high perception. Traveling with Boone often means running across the Mojave will result in random kill cams. That's Boone sniping enemies from a ways off, generally keeping the immediate vicinity clear. He is arguably the best ranged human companion in the game. His quest, I Forgot to Remember to Forget, is also an incredibly moving moving, tragic story to play through, slowly helping Boone to open up about his past, learning about all the things he's been through, Bitter Springs, and his wife. And it's easily some of the best writing in the game, perhaps the most moving story out of all main companions. I would absolutely recommend traveling with Boone for long enough until you can complete the whole thing. But traveling with him generally also comes with one massive issue. It's completely understandable why Boone wants to kill every legionary he sees on sight, but for us, the player, who likely wants to remain neutral in order to allow for easier travel and more quests across the Mojave, this trait of Boone's can be a real pain. He does often warn us when we're straying near a Legion camp, so that's useful, but even still, I have had to reload saves more times than I care to admit traveling with Boone due to accidentally aggroing the Legion. There is of course a workaround to this. Boone won't go hostile if we don Legion armor. He'll understand that we're in disguise, I suppose, but this simply flips the problem over to the NCR, who, now thinking we're a legionary, will then attack us on sight. We also, of course, can't keep Boone as a companion if trying to do a Legion-affiliated run. But hey, despite the more difficult management logistics, it certainly strengthens Boone as a character to have this quality, and if you have turned hostile towards the Legion, it's cool to have a companion with more reason to hate them than you do. So, on account of writing, combined with probably being the most powerful ranged human companion in the game, despite the issues on the other side of that, Boone just about makes it into third place. If there's one companion in New Vegas that I think is heavily underrated, then it'd be our pre-war ghoul friend Raul Tejada, whom we can meet atop Black Mountain. Well over 200 years old by the time of New Vegas, Raul has had a longer and richer history than any of the others, laden with plenty of tragedy of his own. Growing up on a ranch outside Mexico City, Raul and his family survived the initial bombs of 2077, becoming a prime target for other survivors to flock to. Raul's family initially did what they could, taking in survivors and giving them food, but simply didn't have enough to go between everyone, eventually having to drive people off for the sake of their own self-preservation. The other survivors didn't take kindly to this, however, and, ungrateful for the hospitality they had been given, they returned by cover of darkness and set the ranch ablaze, killing Raul's entire large family inside the house, save for him and his sister, who managed to escape out of a window. But the perpetrators were so bitter that they wanted to ensure nobody survived, pursuing the two and forcing Raul to exercise his elite gunslinging skills. After that, having no idea what to do since the world had ended, the two ventured into the heavily irradiated Mexico City, no doubt setting in motion the ghoulification of Raul that would follow. In Mexico, Raul came upon an old vaquero outfit, and combined with his natural skills as a gunslinger, became known as the Zombie Vaquero of Mexico City. But with such a name came unwanted attention. Eventually, the radiation sickness caught up with Raul, initially making him too ill to go out scavenging for supplies. So his sister went alone, and, as you can expect, was captured and killed by a group of raiders. After finding her body, Raul tracked down the men who did it, and despite having only a few bullets left, managed to end every single one of them, promising then to stop being the vaquero on account of the title attracting the attention that got his sister killed. After that, Raul wandered the wastes, now an immortal ghoul for what would have been hundreds of years, settling down now to become a mechanic. Decades later, in the town where he now worked, there also lived a woman named Claudia, who reminded him a lot of his sister, so Raul, from a distance, took it upon himself to keep an eye on her, until one day she too was kidnapped and killed by raiders. So, for the first time in decades, Raul reawakened his gunslinger skills, taking down the entire gang, but not nearly as skillfully as in his youth. After the fight, he'd sustained so many bullet wounds that he barely had the strength to crawl back to town. And following what was just another tragedy for Raul, he decided to wander once again, this time to the source of a radio signal on Black Mountain in the Mojave. Here he was imprisoned by Tabitha and her Nightkin crew, forced to work as their mechanic, which is where we come in, quite by chance fighting our way into this place and setting Raul free. As someone who's lived for so very long, Raul firstly is more tolerant of whichever whichever faction we choose to support. Whilst T2 sees the Legion's methods as unnecessarily extreme, he is perhaps the only one to have also seen what Arizona was like before the Legion came to power. An entirely lawless state governed by savage raider tribes who took what they wanted from innocent, peaceful folk. The Legion may not be much better than that, but it is something, at least. As a former gunslinger, Raul's skills with weapons remain decent. Perhaps not as effective as Boone, but combat aid isn't really the reason to travel with Raul, necessarily. It's initially more to do with his later life as a mechanic. You see, Raul will initially provide us with the perk Regular Maintenance, giving a 50% reduction in gear degradation for everything we have and use. He can also repair stuff, but only if dismissed all the way back to his shack. Now, gear degradation can become a major problem, especially into the late game. Weapon repair kits are a good answer, but they're not always the easiest to come by, and depending on what we're using, finding similar gear with which to perform repairs isn't always viable either. But by having Raul with us, this problem is literally halved, and everything lasts for significantly longer. It's certainly one of the more generous stat boosts from a perk as well, however it can get even better. Traveling around the Mojave with Raul, if we visit 3 more old-timers, their stories will inspire Raul's own. Paying visits to Loyal at the Boomers, Ranger Andy and Novak, and Corporal Sterling at Camp McCarran, their stories will have Raul reflect once again on whether he's truly done with the life of a gunslinger. If he decides to properly pick up a pistol again, then in addition to regular maintenance, he'll gain the old Vaquero perk, boosting his fire rate with revolvers and lever-action rifles by 33%. Decent if you thought Raul was lacking a little on the combat side of things, but if we convince him that yes, maybe he should just stay back as support for us, then his basic perk will upgrade to full maintenance, now reducing degradation by a huge 75%, almost entirely removing the issue with having to repair gear, something that could also otherwise be extremely expensive in a pinch, depending on what weapons we're carrying. So perhaps Raul has the unfair advantage of time and experience out of everyone here, but with an interesting, if no less tragic story, and perks that are genuinely really passively useful, Raul comes in an easy second here. And if we're being honest, this video's winner has a very unfair advantage. Given the complexity and performances of many of these characters, it feels a little strange awarding Best Companion to a mute Eyebot, or perhaps technically 2 Eyebots, though their usage is mutually exclusive and they can exchange data and memories. So to not overcomplicate things, let's just class both Eddies under the same companion banner. We can first find Eddie, the Mojave variant, at the Nash residence in Prim, laying as a broken heap of scrap in the corner. With either a science skill above 55, repair over 65, or a set of spare parts, Eddie can be brought back to life to become the best companion in the game. His story is fairly simple. Constructed by one Dr. Whitley of the East Coast Enclave, Duraframe Eyebots were eventually ordered to be recycled into Hellfire armor due to the events of Fallout 3. But attached to his creation, Dr. Whitley sent this version of Eddie to seek out the Enclave remnants of the West Coast, with files containing much of their scientific research. On his journey though, Eddie was shot down by raiders near Prim, where he was recovered by a courier and given to Johnson Nash, eventually falling into our hands when we repair him. Meanwhile, however, over in the Divide prior to its destruction, the people there managed to pull remote scans of Eddie to build copies, hence the additional version we meet in Lonesome Road. Less damaged than Eddie Prime and thus more capable of displaying emotion and generally just having more character. Though of course the writing of that entire DLC was done with Eddie in mind as the companion for it. Even still, one being a literal copy of the other, the abilities of both versions carry over, provided you have Lonesome Road, making Eddie by far the most useful companion to have with us in the game. Plus, he fills the same additional slot as Rex, so we can also just have a human anyway. Pair Eddie with Boone for the ultimate ranged attack duo, or with Raul to mitigate gear degradation even further. Or, you know, really anyone except for Rex. Though to be fair, fair, Eddie does kind of nullify Veronica's portable workbench perk by having the same thing, and plenty more. If we also find all 5 broken iBot copies across the divide, we can give Eddie a weapon maintenance function, repairing our equipped weapon by 25% per day, again, great pairing with Raul, as well as an ability to produce ammunition each day, like energy and microfusion cells, a boosted damage threshold. In fact, Eddie can also level up to have some of the highest hit points of any companion. His beam damage can also be increased, and finally, our VATS accuracy can be increased by 5%. And that's just lonesome road perks. There's also enhanced sensors in the base game, which effectively raises our perception to the maximum 10 and allows us to target invisible enemies like Nightkin in VATS. After traveling with Eddie for a while in the Mojave, we'll also eventually be contacted by the followers of the Apocalypse and the Brotherhood of Steel, both wanting to borrow the iBots and harvest the information that's on it. Depending on who we allow to do this, Eddie will either receive upgraded armor from the Brotherhood, increasing his damage threshold from 8 to 20 and providing the same clean look as Lonesome Rhodes. Or, when lending him to the followers of the Apocalypse, he'll come back with a blue laser, vaporizing foes now in the same way the alien blaster does. This will also mean losing the best companion for a few days, but he will be even stronger upon return. The only criticism, perhaps, that we could make of Eddie is that the Mojave variant is significantly less characterful than the one at the Divide, and it seems almost a shame after returning from completing the DLC to now be traveling with the more boring version of the iBots. But that can also just be easily balanced out by bringing a more human companion along with us too. Overall though, if this video has shown you anything, I hope it's that each companion deserves some time to travel around with us, even if it's only to complete their loyalty quest. But ultimately, when all is done in New Vegas, for me personally, the final shot of my game will simply be a courier and their floating iBots wandering into the desert. But let me know in the comments who your favorite companion is in Fallout New Vegas and why. I've got plenty more content planned for Fallout and Cyberpunk, of course, as always, so be sure to subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you, as always, to the patrons and channel members for supporting my content. Cheers for watching. I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you in the next one.